All right, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a look at something you've probably heard of, but maybe you haven't thought about it in this way. We're typing TED Talks and how they can be, well, a bit of a secret weapon, a way to really level up your English listening skills. It's like, you know those resources you already have but don't fully utilize. We're going to unlock their potential.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to do a deep dive, really get into the nitty-gritty. How can we use TED Talks to go beyond just hearing English? We want to understand it, right?
Yeah.
And we're not just going to say, watch TED Talks. We've got some sources here, some real practical methods, things that work that you can start using today.
Okay, so first things first, why TED Talks? What makes them so special for really boosting your English listening?
Well, one thing that's really cool about them is the variety. You've got speakers from all over the place with all sorts of accents. And it's like, for your brain, think of it as a workout, right? Each accent is like a new kind of exercise. So you're not just getting used to one type of English, you're getting this global immersive experience.
I like that. It's like you're not just trying to understand textbook English. You're getting ready for the real world. And I mean, let's be real. The topics themselves are usually pretty interesting, right? You're actually invested in what you're listening to.
Oh, for sure. That makes a huge difference. When you're actually curious about something, you're way more likely to, really pay attention and want to understand the language. It's not a chore, it's like discovery. It's fun.
Yeah, for sure. So our sources here talk about 5 main benefits of using TED Talks for this. And, we touched on the first one already, all those different accents, but I'm curious, from your experience, is that really the toughest part for people, or are there other things that trip people up more when they're trying to get better at listening?
That's a good question. Accents are definitely a challenge at first, for sure. But, I think the speed that people talk at and just
Yeah.
the sheer amount of new words you come across, those can be pretty tough too. But that's what's great about TED Talks. They kind of hit all those areas.
Right, right. Okay, so benefit number 2, clear pronunciation. Now, the source does point out, even though there are all these accents, a lot of TED speakers, they're chosen because they're good at explaining things clearly, right?
Yeah, that's important. So you're getting exposed to different ways of speaking, but generally from people who are just good communicators, which means you actually have a good chance of understanding the words, the sounds, and that's like the foundation, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Then the third benefit is kind of what we've been talking about, the topics themselves. It just makes such a difference when you're learning about something that grabs your attention. It's not just like boring drills.
Absolutely. And I think that helps you understand better, too. You're not just trying to figure out the words, you're trying to get the ideas. It's way more engaging.
Okay, fourth, authentic speech patterns.
Yeah.
So this is where you're hearing English as it's really spoken.
Yeah.
Like the rhythms, the pauses, how people emphasize certain words. It's not like reading a textbook. It's the real deal.
Yeah, and that's where you start picking up on the little things, like how native speakers group words together, where they pause for emphasis, even how the tone of their voice can change the meaning. That's the stuff that takes your understanding to the next level.
And finally, the fifth benefit is something that can be really helpful, especially when you're starting out. Subtitles and transcripts, it's like having a little bit of extra help.
Totally. Especially at first, they can be so valuable. You see the words written out, you can double check if you heard something right. But the goal is to, eventually not need them. We'll talk about some ways to do that later, some more advanced stuff.
Perfect. So we know why TED Talks are great, but just watching them, that's not enough. Our source lays out this really clever 5-step method, like how to turn watching TED Talks into, real learning. You want to walk us through that?
Yeah, definitely. It's all about being strategic, like really breaking down the listening process.
Okay, so step 1 is, first, no subtitles. So you're listening to a short section of a talk, but you're doing it without looking at anything, no subtitles. What should you be focusing on here?
Just the big picture. Don't worry about every single word. What's the main topic? What's the point the speaker's trying to make? Try to get a feel for the overall, tone, the vibe of the talk. It's about setting the stage.
Gotcha. Then, step 2. Second, listen with subtitles. So same section, but now you turn on the English subtitles. What changes this time around?
Now you can fill in those gaps. So maybe there were some words you didn't catch the first time. Now you can see them, see how they match up with the sounds. It helps you build your vocabulary, and it also just reinforces what you're hearing.
All right, step 3 is where you really get in there. Break it down. So you're going back to specific parts, maybe things you found tricky, and you're really trying to understand them. Key phrases, new words, how the speaker pronounces things. What's the best way to tackle this?
It's like detective work, you know? Pause the video, write down any words you don't know, look them up, try to understand what they mean in that sentence, and pay attention to how the speaker says them. Even try saying them yourself. Having a notebook or like a document on your computer can be really helpful for this.
Step 4, repeat and shadow. So you're listening again, but this time you're actually trying to speak along with the speaker. You're trying to mimic their tone, their rhythm, everything. Why is this so helpful?
It's like training your mouth and your ears to work together, you know? You start to internalize the way English sounds, the way it flows. And by actually speaking, you're engaging those muscles, those memories. It helps with pronunciation, with fluency, and it really forces you to pay attention to the details of how the speaker is talking.
And finally, step 5, summarize and discuss. So after all that listening, you're trying to explain what you understood in your own words.
Yeah, this is where you really make sure you got it. By summarizing, you're processing the information, you're showing yourself, and maybe someone else, that you understood the message. And discussing it, even if it's just talking to yourself, helps you understand and remember it even better.
Okay, that's the 5-step method.
Yeah.
Now, our source also gives us a couple of really great examples to see this in action. The first one was Brené Brown's talk about vulnerability. What were the main things to learn from that one?
Well, in that example, it really showed how important it is to focus on the main message. Like in Brené Brown's talk, it was about how vulnerability is actually a key part of being courageous and building connections. And, you know, think about it, if you really understand that, it can change how you interact with people, how you see strength. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is. And they pointed out a couple of really, well, powerful phrases, I guess you could say, from her talk. Like, to be vulnerable means to be courageous, and we cannot selectively numb emotions. Why is it good to focus on specific quotes like that?
Those little phrases, they often capture the whole idea of the talk. You know, they're like the essence of what the speaker's trying to say. And by really digging into them, you can learn a lot about vocabulary, grammar. It's like concentrated learning in a way.
Right. And for pronunciation, in that example, it talked about how Brené Brown says specific words like vulnerable and courageous. And it suggested, you know, really pay attention to those. Try repeating them. How does that help?
By zeroing in on those words, you train your ear to hear those subtle differences in the sounds. And when you say them over and over yourself, it builds up that muscle memory. You get more confident with those words.
All right. Then there was another example about speaking with clarity and impact. What was the big idea there?
That one was all about how communicating effectively when you're speaking with honesty, authenticity, integrity, and love, it makes people really listen. And think about how that could help you, whether you're giving a presentation at work or just talking to friends. It's a valuable skill.
Yeah, definitely. And they talked about this acronym HAIL, which stands for those 4 things: honesty, authenticity, integrity, and love. It's like a framework for better communication. Why is it helpful to focus on those kinds of frameworks, you think?
Well, they give you a structure, a way to remember complex ideas. And by understanding each part, you get a deeper understanding of the whole thing. It's like a mental checklist for how to communicate well. And they're easy to remember, easy to use.
And the pronunciation tip for that one was to focus on the speaker's rhythm, how they use pauses to make things clearer. And they suggested repeating that hail phrase, but really paying attention to how you say it, your tone. Why is that important?
Because communication is not just about the words, right? It's about how you say them. Rhythm and pauses, they can change how people understand what you're saying. So by practicing that, you become more aware of it, both when you're listening and when you're speaking.
Okay, now let's be real. Learning a new language, especially the listening part, it's tough. Our source goes over some common challenges you might hit. Let's talk about those and what you can do about them. First up, fast speech. It can feel like everyone's talking a mile a minute. Any tips for dealing with that?
Oh, yeah, that's super common. I think the easiest thing is, you know, most video players have that speed control, right? Slow it down, even to like 0.75 speed or 0.5. It makes such a difference. Listen a few times slower, then try it at normal speed. Don't feel bad about using that. It's there to help.
Exactly. It's not about speed. It's about understanding. Another one that can be frustrating, new words all the time. And it's like you miss a few words and suddenly you're lost. What's the best way to handle that?
A vocabulary journal, that's a classic for a reason. Write down the word, look up the definition, try to use it in a sentence, and then go back and review your journal. It really helps those words stick.
Makes sense. Okay, next, accents. Now, we talked about how great it is to hear different accents, but I know that at first it can also make things harder to understand. What can you do about that?
Just listen to more accents. Seriously. Seek out TED Talks with speakers from different places. The more you hear, the better your brain gets at adapting and understanding, no matter how someone says it.
And lastly, the dreaded distracted listening. It happens to everyone, you know. You're trying to focus, but your mind wanders off. What's a good strategy for that?
Instead of trying to catch every single word, try focusing on just the key words and phrases, the ones that carry the main meaning. You can often still get the gist, even if you miss a few connecting words. It helps you stay focused and not get overwhelmed.
Okay, so those are the basics. But for those who are ready to really push themselves, our source also had some advanced techniques, like taking your TED Talk, listening to the next level. Ready for that?
Yeah, bring it on. These are about going beyond just understanding, really challenging yourself to engage with the language.
So advanced technique number 1, predict the next sentence. You're listening to the talk, and you pause it, and you actually try to guess what the speaker is going to say next. How does that help?
It's like a workout for your brain, you know? You're using your knowledge of grammar, of how English is usually spoken, to make a prediction. Even if you're wrong sometimes, it makes you think in a different way.
Okay, advanced tip number 2, write a summary. But you do it after listening to the talk, without looking at any notes or transcripts, just from memory.
This one is tough, but so good for you. It forces you to remember the main points and then put them into your own words, which is like essential for fluency, and it shows you where you might have missed something.
Technique number 3 is one we talked about before, but now it's advanced level. Shadowing. That speaking along with the speaker thing. Why is it considered an advanced technique?
Well, before, it was about just trying it out. Now it's about doing it really well, really accurately. It's not just repeating the words, it's matching the speaker's tone, their rhythm, even those tiny pauses. It takes a lot of focus.
And finally, advanced technique number 4. Ditch the subtitles. But do it gradually. Start with them. But then try listening to longer and longer sections without them. What's the benefit of that?
Independence. You're pushing yourself to understand without that crutch. It makes your brain work harder to process the spoken English. It takes time, but it's how you get to that next level.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's pretty clear that TED Talks are a goldmine for anyone who wants to get better at understanding English. They're fun, they're interesting, and they're a fantastic way to learn.
And the main takeaway is you have to be active. Use the methods we talked about, those techniques. Be consistent, and you'll see real progress.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So here's a thought for you. Pick a TED Talk, any topic that grabs you, something you're really interested in. Then try out 1 or 2 of the things we talked about today. See what you notice, what challenges you hit, what clicks for you. This is just the start, you know? There's a whole world of learning waiting for you. Happy listening.